We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity podcast, and we're going through the movie book library. And so we've gone through different books, and we've gone through the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That was fun. And then we went through the Think and Grow Rich, and then Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So Rosanna, I'm curious, like, what did you learn from Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
That it's okay to take risks when you're working with, when you're learning things along the way, and that I shouldn't let money control me. I should be able to control the money that I'm dealing with, how I spend it, and how to think for the future.
So, I'm a little poosty today because Michael Schuster showed up. Like I invite, people week after week. He never shows up. And then you invite him and he shows up. It's like, what's up with that? So, Michael, good to have you on. Why
Thank you.
did you show up today?
What's that?
Why did you show up today?
Just seeing the topic and I go, interesting. I like the concepts, and basically the takeaways for me was, that we're stewards of our goods and our riches and our materials, and we're just to be great stewards with it. And this is one of those books that kind of shows us how to be better stewards with what God has given us and our riches.
Are you familiar with the seven T's?
The what now?
The seven T's to stewardship?
Yeah, you probably went over with me with them probably a few years ago, but not sure. I'm not sure I recall them all.
So good Catholics and good Baptists, obviously you have to steward your time, and you have to steward your talents, your material things, which is giving a lot of money to the church, obviously, because that's a good thing to do. Um, so talents is going to be, our gifts and things like that. So the Catholics and the Baptists are taught three T's: time, talents, and treasure. But there's actually seven T's. So it's time, talents, treasure, trust, truth, temple, and thought. So talents, treasure, time, talents, treasure, trust, truth, temple, and thought. So there's seven T's to stewardship. And so, good work, Rosanna, on doing a brief on the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Anybody else actually have read the book?
Yes.
And what are your thoughts, Mary Jo, on it?
Honestly, I just love the whole concept. It's amazing how the difference of households comes together and just accelerates everything for the person. Like, you have to have both frame of minds, but you have to find the right balance between them.
Interesting. Cool. Ben, any thoughts that you have?
On Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or just in general?
Yeah.
I always love those answers. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, I've grew up with that book because you say it every other week about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Just based off the title, I've had both. So, sometimes I prefer Poor Dad.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I had both. I had a rich dad and then I had a poor dad.
Right. So why did you prefer the Poor Dad?
Maybe if I had it altered to where when I was younger, I had a rich dad, and then when I got older, I preferred a poor dad.
And
Because
do you think it's reversed? You think when you were younger you had a poor dad, and when you're older, you had a rich dad? Is that what you think?
Financially speaking, I not as well off. 7 children is difficult. Mentally speaking, my dad was pretty rich in a lot of areas in that area. If that makes sense.
Does to me. Other questions or thoughts, Ben, that you have just on anything?
Uh, I got a lot going on lately, so just trying to rock it out.
Nice.
Just turned
Hannah,
26.
Hannah, welcome. Are you going to join us video wise, Hannah?
How to get my dad to react
Probably
like that
not
when I get
today.
done.
Not today. um, I, it's, yeah, I don't even know where to take this now. So, Hannah, I'm curious, like, what was it that triggered you to join today's, podcast for your first podcast visit?
Well, I've heard of the book. I've just never read it, but I was intrigued. So I don't know how long I'll be able to stay though.
Okay, well, good to have you on for whatever time you're able to.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, Melissa, any thoughts that you have on Rich Dad Poor Dad?
It's been a while since I've read it, but I feel like um I think that was one of the first books I read when I was um dating Jason. I read it. I think I had finished previously, but it was um yeah, it was really good. Maybe I should get my kids to just start reading it when they learn to read. Pump that into our blood. Um I don't know. To me, I don't I don't think I don't think I had both, as Ben puts it. I'm trying to remember what both of them were. Um, but to me, I feel the benefit of potentially having both, because one gives you one perspective and the other gives you a different perspective. So, um, but yeah, I'd have to reread it, I think.
So, just for context, if for those that don't know, Melissa's our second oldest daughter. She is married and now has 3 children. And so that's Melissa Miller. Ben is our second youngest son. He is married, and so it's good to have both of them on. Um, so they're going to be coming at it from a perspective. Um, now that now that you all know that they're my children, I'm sure you have some questions for them. So this is why I like to see video, because Michael Schuster hasn't said anything verbally, but he said everything visually. So if you can join us, if you're able to join us, on a video, if you're able to do that, it's a much richer podcast experience that you'll have. So go ahead, Michael.
Excuse me. Yes, I was kind of in the back of my mind thinking, okay, well, this ought to be interesting coming from, your child's perspective of how that was played out and how they experienced it.
Right. Right. So, if you guys want, I can go get breakfast and you guys can talk to my kids without me being present, if that would help you do this. Oh, just to give history on it. So I realized, I don't know what it was, 20 years ago or whatever, that a lot of the thinking that I have comes from the books I've read. And so I tried to get my children to read the books that I read. I was not so successful at that. Sometimes I'd pay them, and I don't even know if that was successful. I mean, they read it because they got paid to do it, but I don't know if they really internalized it. Back then, I didn't know what internalization meant. It wasn't until a few years back that I realized that even if somebody reads a book, they're not going to get the same thing from the book that I do. And that's a shame. I mean, it's good, but a lot of times I think, said I'm not a real big reader. I mean, I do read, a fair amount. So in the last, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks, I've read, I don't know, 3, 4 books. So I read a fair amount, but I don't like reading. I don't enjoy it.
That's
It's
probably what happened is you enjoy reading so much, so you took it all from us. And then there's other people that might not like reading because you read a lot.
I don't know. I'm not sure. My wife, Rosanna, she enjoys reading. But I think she does it more for entertainment. I do it more because it's like, if I'm going to do something I don't like doing, then I'm going to gain something, a big benefit from it. If we enjoy something we're doing, if we enjoy something we're doing, we typically don't work as hard to gain something of benefit from it. So what I did is I said, okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start. I wish, years ago, 40, 50 years ago, that I would have done book reports on all of the books. But I'm like, I didn't do that. But you can go back in time and write a paragraph or two about the book. And that's how this came about. These are the books that have impacted how I think today a lot. And so in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the thing, one dad, was, his real dad, his birth father, who he grew up with, believed that you needed an education, like you needed to get a degree. And the poor dad didn't have a degree. And the poor dad had a degree, but, he didn't make lots and lots of money. The rich dad didn't have a college degree and looked at investing into real estate and other things to become wealthy. And so the rich dad didn't have education, the poor dad did. But the rich dad had a totally different way of viewing life. And so it was interesting to me because, I have 3 degrees. Some of my kids have degrees, some of them don't. My dad had a seminary degree, a college degree. My mom did not. My parents, I would say, didn't push, college education. But the area we grew up in was very much college focused. And so the high school we went to, you just went to college. Everybody went to college. It was just, this is what you do. I say to the Amish, that if I would have known that I could have joined the Amish and only gone through 8th, grade and then started working, I would have been pushing my parents big time to become Amish. I didn't know that there was an option to only go through 8th grade. The Amish, in my experience, it's the most intriguing thing to me, is they are far, as a general rule, not all Amish, not all English, but as a general rule, the Amish, it seems to me, are far more hungry to learn than the English. And it's like the Jews and the Gentiles, so groups of people, it's like, if you're not Amish, you're English. When I first heard that, I'm like, what is that? Well, if you're not Amish, you're English. So there's 2 groups of people in the world, Amish and English, or Jews and Gentiles. So it's like, it's interesting when you think about that. Another topic for another time. But so to me, and my theory is that it's almost like 8th grade education. They feel that they've been gypped. They feel that there's more that they should learn, and it's like something was stolen, something wasn't there. And it's genius actually, because they don't keep going to school until they're sick of school. Like with 3 college degrees, I didn't like high school. I didn't like junior high. When I got my 3 degrees in business, man, I mean, I was studying what I loved doing, so it wasn't terrible. But man, I was really glad to get out of school, big time. And so it's like, other questions or thoughts that anyone has?
It's kind of interesting that you share how school kind of went for you. In my household, none of us were expected to go on to higher education. And I actually had to kind of beg my parents to let me go on to further education. And it was
See,
so
I
kind
didn't
of
even know
funny when
you
I was
had a
a kid.
degree. What degree do you have?
I have a degree in business and, believe it or not, economics and agriculture,
Wow,
because
that
that's
makes a
what
lot
I
of
got.
sense, actually. Economics was like that, and statistics were too, like, man, it was hard.
It's
Like,
a
that's really cool that I've known you for how many years? A long time, and I've never known that. It's just intriguing. Rosanna, neither of her parents graduated from high school, none of her grandparents. She's the first generation that ever graduated from high school. And I remember when we got married, like she wanted to go on to college and get her elementary education degree. And so I was totally for that. And I don't know, after we got married, we were sophomores in college. And then our parents are like, well, you're going to have kids. Why finish college? I'm like, what? And then they started conspiring against me. Like, Rosanna's like, well, if I got pregnant, I'd still finish my college. And, we were married and everything. And so I'd still finish my college, and maybe your mom or my mom could watch the little one. I'm like, no, we're not. You're not going to get pregnant. No, no, not until we finish. But she kept wearing me down. Like, and, and so then she's like 4 months out from graduating. So she's getting her elementary education degree. And, and so she's the last quarter, she's in, she's doing student teaching. And she's like, well, maybe we could try, because, it takes months to get pregnant, sometimes years. I mean, it can take a long time. And me being a naive 23-year-old, 22, 23-year-old, I'm like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. It didn't take months. It took 1 month. Like, it was bam. So she's pregnant going in to student teaching. And so they go ahead, when they find out she's pregnant, they like, well, you really can't be a student teacher when you're pregnant. I'm like, what? Like, you can't do that. They're like, well, you can come back afterwards. I'm like, no, this is not how it works. She's getting her degree. So she pushed through it. She did a great job and got her degree, which was really interesting. Any other thoughts or questions?
This week, my grandma has been saying something almost every day about how I would make a good nurse. And I keep telling her I've thought about it, but I don't want those student loans.
Right?
I don't understand where it came from originally, because this was just kind of out of the blue.
Do you want to be a nurse?
Huh?
Do you want to be a nurse?
Well, I love taking care of people.
Well, just get married and have kids. Or just
Not.
be a business owner. Like, like, there's a whole bunch of ways you can take care of people, other than being a nurse. So it's interesting. And so,
I think
uh,
I'm halfway curious if she keeps saying something about it because she wants someone in the hospital that she
ah,
recognizes and she's familiar with.
But she will take care of her when she gets older.
Yeah, that's kind of now a little bit. So
That's mostly with Grandpa.
yeah, interesting. Anybody else have anything else before we wrap up this podcast? And so hopefully you're all going to be able to stick around for the next podcast. You thought this one was good. The next one is actually Ben's podcast, and it's Podcast for Passions. And so next podcast that we have next week will be a Thomas Jefferson education. Rich Dad Poor Dad is really popular. Most people have heard about it. But a Thomas Jefferson education, almost nobody's ever heard of that. And so the story behind that and that book is just it's crazy. I mean, it is one of the craziest books because it gives the history of the American educational system and why and how the American educational system was designed and architected to create factory workers. And it's still that way today. And so, fascinating book. So, thank you, Rosanna. Huge help to do a summary of the book. And so, so doing a summary of the book that helps if people aren't able to read the whole book. But this one's going to be a winner. Like this one, get other people to participate in this for sure. And then the next podcast, Ben and I were on vacation together, just he and I doing a guys thing in Pigeon Forge. And we were in the hot tub talking, and Ben said, Dad, I don't know that I'm really passionate about anything. And I'm like, really? I think you are. And so he decided to start a podcast. So I don't know if that was a year ago or whatever it was. It was a while back. And so I think that there's a lot of, especially in the young people today, I think that there's a, it's like a famine. Like they have all these passions that are going into energy drinks and alcohol and drugs and gaming and all this stuff, and they don't really understand the passions that don't cost you but give you far more. You put 100 pounds of passion into any of those other things, and you're just going to want more of it. You put 100 pounds of passion into, what you're becoming, who you were created to be. And I'm telling you, it's crazy what will happen. So always remember we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Stick around for the next podcast. You'll enjoy it for sure. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.